Alrighty then. I'm gonna get started. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are well. Hope you had a good week. I've missed you guys. It felt like a little bit off not seeing you guys the first week, but it just kind of worked out that way. And I also didn't want to put it on Easter or anything like that. That just would not be being conscious of what people celebrate. So hopefully you all had a great holiday, great week. Um, Definitely today I wanted to kind of bring to you the TTPC pillars, which is going to basically serve as our values, if you will. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I think I mentioned that I wanted to kind of bring it home as we've been talking about things like generational trauma. We talked a bit about, feminine energy and how to cultivate that last month. And so this month, I wanted to kind of talk about equanimity. And if you don't know what it is, I'll explain it. But it's really kind of like this concept of how we look at all these experiences. So the trauma and this like constant evolution, how do we look at all of that with a different lens, and without kind of placing a value on things? So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But to begin, let's share our wins. I'll put myself on mute and you guys can tell me like where you've been winning. Again, it doesn't have to be super professional, but it can just be, a personal win or something small like you folded your laundry, whatever. Just anything that you're particularly proud of. So I'm going to put myself on mute.
Hey everybody, it's Shelly. Happy Saturday. I think my big win is just my own physical recovery. I don't know if you guys know what's been going on. I know Janine has, but I had a pretty rough time towards the end of the year, going through a really major surgery that could have gone some other ways, but I'm just grateful that I'm alive, I'm well. I still have a long journey, but it really doesn't matter. I'm just really appreciating every single day. So physically, I feel phantasmic and I can fit into my clothes and everything. So maybe a professional win. I think at work, things have changed. I mean, I have really been struggling with whether or not what my next step will be and where I see myself in the next year or two. But I've been pulled into more strategic initiatives and leading those. And so my professional win is I thought I was being undervalued until I had to maybe even step back and realize that no, I'm actually a high value. I call myself a unicorn at my organization. So I think some of my leaders are starting to realize that this Black girl can bring a lot more to the table than even some of them. So that's been good, but it's still a struggle. Jealousy has popped up. Janine, I know you warned, but jealousy has popped up among my peers, and even that I'm trying not to be distracted. I think what it's doing for me is really giving me a chance to show the other side of my skill sets and being an asset, and being impactful. But I'm also, quite frankly, padding my resume, making more connections, networking, being more thoughtful about who I network with. I've turned down a lot of speaking engagements because I'm at the point where I'm sorry, I'm not going to give out my expertise for free anymore. Sorry about that. That's not going down. Another warning. Thanks you, Janine. But really thinking about where I want to be. And though the job that I want, I don't know if it exists yet or where it exists, but I feel like if that's where I'm led to be, then that's where I'm going to be. So I'm grateful for you guys and for sending all the positive vibes. So those are my two wins.
Good morning. I would say my personal win, I feel every day that I wake up and I'm, able to get up and walk and, just overall have life and health is a win for me. Professionally, my private practice continues to grow. It's doing well, so that continues to be a win for me. And that's it.
So I always love the laundry because coming into this meeting, I'm always passing a basket of unfolded laundry. So that's not a win. But what is a win is that I submitted my very first contract for consulting work. And that is huge for me. And it is with our area United Way. So they are very excited, and I'm excited, nervous. I have no idea how it's going to go, what it's going to be, but I'm jumping in. I'm getting uncomfortable. I'm listening to all the things, all the things. So, I'm really, 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 really excited. Thanks, y'all. That's it.
Anybody else? That's amazing. Congratulations, Tessa. Like, that's really exciting. Alicia too, because I know from whence this idea came, so that it continues to grow. That's amazing. Shelly, your recovery. I know it was a rough one. I know it has been. I'm going to speak about it in past terms. I know it has been. So I'm glad to hear you back with us, but perky and feeling good and fitting into your clothes. Like, listen, it's the simple things sometimes. Um, so I guess I'll share my win, and it's really just like one. So I hired a publicist in March. And so that's been really exciting because up till now, it's all been me. You know, it's been like getting on, trying to make connections with sources, to have my business featured in different places. And honestly, I never knew, where I would end up. It was always this anonymous thing. I'd always just put my best expertise forward. And the next thing I know, I'm an entrepreneur, whatever. Like, so this week, Thursday, I was on a news segment for my very first time, which is really exciting, in Australia. Um, so that was wild. I'm gonna be honest, like it was wild because one, my very first time, two, international TV, like what? And so there was just this moment of like, you're on, they're like, you're in the green room and then it's like you're on. And I see my name across the screen and I'm saying, what is happening here? Like, this is wild. So anyway, it was very cool. We spoke about my work with diversity and inclusion. We talked about ethics and technology a bit, and talked about wellness and well-being. So it's very cool. I'm trying to get my hands on the clip now, but that was a major win for me. Like, if nothing else goes my way this month, that was that. So very cool. I'm happy for all of us. It sounds like we're making moves, and that's what this is all about. So let's talk TTPC pillars a bit. Um, as you all know, TTPC really started off as something, small, very intimate, and I still have an intention to keep it that way as well. But I think as we continue to grow as a membership and bring on other people, I think it's extremely important to have kind of shared values between us. Think just some foundational things that we understand as a group, about how we're moving collectively, but also how we're showing up in our own lives individually. And so I have to thank the board for kind of, pulling this all together, but also you all that lent your voice, when we kind of got stuck on some of these values and how we wanted to go with it. So we have our values. This is exciting. It's all based on the TTPC acronym. And so the values are transformational, tenacious, purposeful, and community. So when we say that we're transformational, what we're saying is that TTPC members are a mosaic of women dedicated to evolving individually and collectively in an effort to inspire change while supporting our sisters. When we talk about being tenacious, we are committed and empowered to stay the course through shared principles and inclusivity. We're purposeful. So when we say that we're purposeful, we are intentional in our personal, professional, and spiritual journeys, making sure our impact does the greatest amount of good. And then for community, we're saying TTPC is a resilient collective grounded by respect, transparency, and support for where each of us is in our respective journeys. So when I think about us and each of you, I think this really sums us up in a good fashion. And I also think that it lays good groundwork for anybody that's going to come in the future to know, like, this is what we stand for, this is what we're committed to. So this will, of course, be in the drive. You can definitely commit it to memory and should, so that, especially as we start going into like the June timeframe, we'll be starting to look at bringing on new members again. Like, this is a good thing if there are people in your networks that you're wanting to kind of pull into the fold. This is what you can share with them to say, it's more than just a group, we more than just meet, like we actually have some values. All right. So let's talk growth and equanimity. I think it's a good month to talk about growth because it's April. Everything's starting to sprout and blossom and all of that. And I'm a firm believer that, like, as nature grows, so do we. I think we've lost that sense a little bit, because we're so industrialized now. But, our more primitive selves, I think we're a lot more in touch with this notion of kind of journeying through the seasons or with the seasons, right? So now that everything's starting to blossom and sprout, hopefully you all are feeling, and I know for me, I am feeling, kind of this renewed sense of self. After a long, dark winter, it's kind of like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to, start building and creating. And so that's kind of the flow. So why am I focused on it? I'm focused on a lot of this in my work in general, which is why I make sure that you all are coming along with me for the journey. So Yuval Harari is like this insanely brilliant author. And I came across him when I was in my transformative tech accelerator a few years ago. He has a few books out. One is Sapiens, highly, highly recommend. The other one, his newer one, is the 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And so really what he's proposing, in a lot of these books is this next human agenda, which, it's not hard to tell that obviously there's a shift happening, with us in society, but certainly I think as a species with all of the things around climate change and, technology advances, things are on the move. And so in his mind, he shared or proposes that the next human agenda is, not rooted in the things that we think they are. It is longevity, it's happiness, and it's augmentation. So, by longevity, it's kind of where we are now. We're at this really kind of unique precipice of having to look at, mass pandemic, health, well-being, like all the spectrums of health. So not just physical health, but, preventative health, our mental health, emotional health, like all of it is up for grabs right now. Everybody's looking at it piece by piece to understand like where we missed the ball in this whole thing. So that's the longevity, like how can we prolong life? What are the things we need to do to prolong life? And then happiness, you know, that's kind of a little bit about what we'll touch today, which is, you know, how are we cultivating it? What does it mean for us? And quite frankly, the longevity and happiness, I think, are connected. I do believe the happier or more content you are with your life, there is a certain longevity that you get from that. And then augmentation, it's this whole principle of like, how can we get beyond just the good, right? Which is like revolutionary for our people, by the way, because although we're hopeful, I don't always know that we think we can dream super big, right? Or there's almost like this ceiling we put on our dreams. Not everybody, not saying this as a generalization, but I'm saying as a culture, there's kind of this cap. You have a few that somehow, some way they got the memo, like dream big anyway. But I think a lot of people would agree culturally, we dream big, but not big enough. Like we could go bigger. We could definitely stand to go bigger. So the augmentation is kind of like, now that we figured out, you know, how we're going to prolong our life, now that we figured out like what that purpose is, that purpose and that meaning is, how can we augment that experience, right? If we're looking at life from an experience perspective. So I thought this quote was really poignant. I was in a session for my shamanic work recently, and we had the ability to connect with an elder of the Mohawk tribe, um, kind of in the Canadian, the Toronto, Ontario area. She was brilliant. And one of the things she said was, you know, there is a beauty in everything we do. We must change our perception about our hardships. I don't know about you all, but, you know, like we've been talking a lot about generational trauma and things that get handed down from the generations that perhaps we either want to keep or we don't want to keep. I know for me and my own family, um, the lens for hardships is kind of this spiral a bit. It's like, okay, the thing is hard, the thing is horrible, whatever, you know, value you want to attribute to it. Now let's ruminate about how horrible it is. And so like there's something really insidious about that cycle. Because what I found is it kind of keeps you in a cycle of more bad things to come. Once you're so focused on your hardships, since I've decided to step out of that and have kind of a broader perspective, a more mindful perspective about it, I find that it's not so much that the hardships are better. You know, like equally, they still feel equally bad, but my mind state is different, right? So I'm not stressing as much. I'm not worrying as much. There's an ease in life that I have, not because the hardships have stopped, but because I'm seeing them differently. And so I think that's an important thing for us to kind of cultivate, especially if we're in this space of kind of like healing and deciding like what comes next. So with equanimity, it's basically this thing of how can you be present to the unpleasant and the pleasant, right? So there's this kind of human condition with us where we only want to feel the good and not the bad, right? And in a certain way, society kind of perpetuates that notion, and glorifies it, that there's something wrong with bad experiences and there's something like really exponentially good about good experiences. And it's not to say that good isn't good, but I guess what equanimity wants us to understand is it's all relative to the premise, the basic premise that this life we're living, for whatever it's worth, is just an experience. So many Eastern ideologies kind of have this foundational principle. Um, and so, you know, equanimity is this idea of having mental composure. It's mental composure, it's mental balance, it's this evenness of temperament, despite whatever you're perceiving that situation or circumstance to be, right? So when we apply equanimity to our lives, it's basically we're trying to see everything as an experience without having to um, assign a value, like a particular value to what's happening, right? So it might seem silly, but it's something as simple as I'm running late and on my way to rushing around, I stump my toe. And so now it's like throbbing and it's bleeding. I have to like tend to it. Now I'm going to be even later to work. Like you can imagine the emotion around that. In my mind, what most of us would do is we would attribute that entire experience as being bad, not pleasant, not something I want to be present to because it's preventing me from doing the very thing that I want to do. And so, like with equanimity in that situation, the goal is to not attribute a value at all. It's to simply say to yourself, well, I was rushing, I was running around. As a result, I stumped my toe, which is causing me to be late. Maybe me being late is actually saving me. Maybe I just like avoided a car crash or whatever. So while I don't love my toe throbbing and I don't love the bleeding and I don't love the fact that I have to rush like that this morning, it's okay. I got to get to work safe. It will all work out. It's that shift in mindset is what kind of equanimity is all about. So I'm big, as you well know, about like achieving balance and just having that lens for life. If you look at life as a series of events, um, generally, most humans cannot actually see the complete value or aren't satisfied until it's well in the rear view because we're so used to having to be stimulated. It's kind of the world that we live in, right? We have our devices. We're constantly on this platform, that platform. We're overstimulated and we're in it's called spiritual greed. You know, this idea that at every moment you need to be entertained, like life needs to be entertaining you somehow. But like for that reason, it's why a lot of experiences are only more satisfying in the rearview mirror. And so equanimity is saying like, no matter whether it's a good season for you or a bad season or a mixed bag of the both, um, it asks you to kind of savor every part of your life like throughout, not just waiting for when it's become clear to you that it was teaching you something or when you can euphemize or romanticize it in the past, but like to savor it all the way through. So what are some ways that like we can start to utilize equanimity? One of the ways that you can start doing that is to ask yourself these questions. So this is mostly for like things that are difficult, challenging, you know, or you're perceiving, and I'm doing this on purpose as bad. And I say that not because there aren't, I guess, bad experiences, it's just that they're just experiences. And so while that sucks to even say, because we we have a need to want to place blame, whether that's on a person or a circumstance. The ego needs that. So when we sit back and we're having all these experiences and we're looking to attribute some sort of value to it, it's mostly because we need somebody to be blamed for it other than ourselves. And we may not even be causing it, but all the same, it's ours, it's our life, it's your journey, you know. So equanimity can be difficult. I'm not putting it forth as something that you'll get overnight because it really requires you to untrain your mind from this mindset of like, this is good because it, affirms something within me or confirms something within me or it makes me feel good. And this is bad because it doesn't affirm me. It doesn't confirm anything, or it doesn't make me feel good. The unpleasant and the pleasant are the same. Like it kind of gets calibrated to just being at the same level when you're fully exercising equanimity. So one of the things you can ask yourself is, how can I be more present to the pleasant and unpleasant? Meaning, when the unpleasant is happening, we're not trying to find an escape. We're not trying to make it something that it's not. We actually sit with that. And that can be difficult depending on who you are and how you handle certain things. But practicing getting more present to the unpleasant in your life, and not always trying to like make it something that it's not supposed to be and trying to learn the lesson is a much further step towards being kind of a person grounded in equanimity. Where does this notion of good or bad start in your story? It's a great kind of exploration thing to have to sit with yourself and say, hey, what was the first time? When was the first time in my life that I started to develop this, I guess, conceptualization of what good or bad is? And we all have that concept. It started somewhere along the line in your childhood. Somebody said, this is good, this is bad. And so there starts kind of this foundation of how you start seeing your world and the world at large in that way. Understanding where it comes from, that then allows you to unpack, like, well, why might that person have attributed those values in that way? Does that framework still work for me now that I'm whomever I am? Like, does it still hold up? And if it doesn't hold up, then that gives us this ability to kind of reframe how we see the good and bad in our life. It's a super rich lesson because now if I can attribute more of it to just experience rather than it bad, I can have a much more positive outlook on things. Maybe less stress. I think we take some of that, maybe less worry. I think we take some of that too. So it's a powerful question if you're willing to kind of sit with yourself and like reframe, understand, unpack, and also reframe after you unpack. Am I perceiving the circumstance as bad because it triggers an emotional response in me? That's a huge question too. Something isn't merely bad because you've had an emotional response that you're uncomfortable with, right? So it's better to understand like why you're uncomfortable or acknowledge the fact that you're uncomfortable in that moment and unpack that than just simply chalking up the entire experience to it being bad. Emotions are tricky and they're also fleeting. And so that's why that question ends up being fairly powerful. If you're willing to kind of come to the acknowledgement of like where these things come from and why you're reacting in, certain ways. Like a big thing for me now, particularly if I'm at odds with somebody, I love like being in this even tempered space where it's like this person's projecting and projecting and projecting on me. Oh, and you made me feel, and you did this and you did that. And I'm like, that's not mine. It's not mine to carry. It's not my emotion. That is, however, how you are kind of projecting yourself onto me, but that isn't mine to carry. And so even in my debates and even when I'm at odds, I'm really in a state of contentment, to be honest with you. I used to get really angry, used to. But now most times I'm in a state of contentment because I know what's mine and I know what's not. And I also know that if I am having an emotional response, it's an opportunity for me to tap in and figure out like, am I overreacting? What is this emotional response? Is this situation really bad? Or is it actually illuminating something for me that I need? It's that kind of thing. So it's a powerful thing if you're willing to work with it. And lastly, how can you identify the roots of your own frustration to see the purpose in the experience? So with equanimity, it's all about every experience is purposeful, right? Nothing is not purposeful. So understanding like kind of the roots of why you're frustrated in that situation, um, can help you have a much different lens for it. You know, when I think back in hindsight about some of the things I've endured, let's just say in the last decade, that I would, most people, and including myself, would deem as bad, they all had a purpose. And while it's almost like bittersweet, you almost want to say, I never want to go through that thing again. And then there's just some sort of richness that happens eventually that you say, you know what, if I had to go through it again, if that's what I had to do to get here, then that was okay. It was actually okay. Pain, discomfort, hurt, whatever it is, all of that, it was worth it. If that's the exact way, then I'm okay with it. And that's the sweet spot, I think, of equanimity. So um, I'm going to share the chant and chat, and then I'm kind of going to just open it up because I think this is a big topic. Um, and I really would love us to kind of discuss as a group, like, you know, how we're handling the bad or the difficult in our lives, and if equanimity is something you feel like you're already practicing or something that you feel like you need to cultivate more of. Um, just general thoughts about things that I said, but I'll share the chant in chat. So it is this month, we're turning our focus to healing and rebirth. I think that's a big part of what April is. April is, for me, a month of like, okay, it's the fourth month in the year. You know, you're kind of off to the races, but in some regards, you may not feel like you've even begun. So it's like a nice month to kind of sit with yourself and like reorganize, before you hit that 6 month mark, that halfway mark. It's like, let's reorganize, let's regroup. What is most salient and alive for me right now? Um, and so, like I said, the season is all about rebirth and resurrection, for those that believe in that sort of thing, but more so fertility, it's growth. It's exactly what I said, it's growth. And so, my encouragement going forward and until we meet again is to really be focused on healing and be focused on, what rebirth means for you in your own life. um, it is definitely time for us to acknowledge ourselves as whole human beings in loving and non-judgmental ways. So as much as like this group is built on the premise of like helping, Black women, women of color, to kind of be more holistic, but also to have like this space in the world where, you can kind of let your hair down and let down some of the pressures of life. It's like, outside of the racism, the misogyny, all of the things that we know are maladies to society, the one thing we can commit to is being whole human beings, and loving ourselves and being non-judgmental with ourselves. Because if we could do that with ourselves, then we can do that with one another. But there is no unity as we're all, collectively out there in the world praying for such a thing. There is no unity unless you can't get right with yourself first. I mean, how am I understanding anybody else or relating if I don't understand myself first? Um, and so, the mantra I'm leaving you with is, I want you to commit to seeing your life with a new lens. And the way that you do that is by cultivating a mindset of positivity. It's not saying that you're always going to be positive in every moment, but when you're not, it's that recognition of, am I being the most positive, or am I being grateful in this moment? And if not, how can I get closer to that incrementally? It's not always about being, glitter, puppies and sunshine and a ball of happiness, but it's just being more mindful and having this ability to like recognize where you're at in a moment, and always remembering like the best place for you to be, that equilibrium, so you can walk yourself back. Um, so I will leave it there. This is the chant and chat. We're healing, we're looking at rebirth, and we're cultivating a more, I'll say, a more positive mindset, because I never wanted to sound like you can't feel your feelings and be down and out. You definitely can. The problem is staying there. We're growing, we're ever blossoming. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'll open up the airwaves for you all to kind of share your thoughts, stories, how you feel about equanimity, if any of this resonates.
I was just, prior to getting on to our session, I was listening to the audiobook of The Game of Life and how to play it. And it's interesting, and as I was listening to, I didn't get too far, but equanimity definitely plays into it. As you mentioned this concept this morning, it definitely ties into it. And it's something that I honestly, I can't say I never heard of the word, but it's not a word that I typically hear people really use. But I have been trying to cultivate equanimity. It has been difficult because when things happen that are hurtful or painful, I tend to sometimes become a little isolative and go into that like, why me? Why again? This is so tough. I'm working so hard. You go through that whole, I don't know if I should say pity party, but that whole self pity, I guess. But definitely it's a wonderful feeling when I have those moments when I stop and say, all right, Alicia, why is this happening though? What are you supposed to gain from this experience? And when I sit still with myself long enough, it does come to me as, oh, maybe this is the lesson you should learn from this. And you can take away something positive from this horrible, painful experience. So I think this topic is very significant to cultivating a life of joy, happiness, just overall well-being. So I think, again, very interesting that I was listening to that book, and then this is the topic that you chose this morning.
Janine, I thought it was interesting. I'll be honest, I was feeling, yes, this is good, right? We don't just need to, celebrate the good and hate the bad. We need to learn the lesson. But in the part where you were talking about receiving that from someone else who was into their equanimity, and they're saying to you, like if someone were saying to me, hey, that's not mine, Tessa, that's yours. I don't know how I would react to that, because that's all fine and all for how I process the thing. But I'm challenging myself right now and trying to work through, this lesson of how am I going to receive that from others as well? They have just as much, they need to own theirs too. Um, so we need to, I'm challenging, myself on on how to work through that, because I totally got it. I got it for me. I can do it, but what am I going to do in other relationships and interactions when somebody's trying to get to that place as well? If y'all feeling what I'm saying, if that makes sense.
I get what you're saying. It's so, I didn't always operate like this. When I started to come from this place of like, okay, so I understand why you would feel that way based on these things. However, when you said this, this, and this, that really wasn't mine. That seemed like a projection. When I tell you fire and brimstone came my way. And, it was startling to me. And I feel the need to share it because, like, I'm now saying to you, like, practice this thing. But I would not be putting you at a fair advantage if I didn't tell you. Expect fire and brimstone, like of epic proportions, when you start to put this in play. People aren't ready. They're not ready for it. And it triggers people to a degree. I've had people say, get me off your couch. Why do I feel like I'm on your clinical couch? And I'd say, well, no, that's not the case at all. Actually, what I'm trying to do is get to the core of your frustration and also share with you what is mine. But I can't take on what you're projecting. A really willing person that loves you will also hit you with the fire and brimstone, but it'll resonate. It'll hit them. It'll hit them, and it will change your relationships for the better if the person's willing to grow in that way. But if you want to find out who's growing with you versus in the reverse, keep this practice up, and you'll just see who's willing to level up. Because I've seen people quickly level up for me, family and platonically. And then I've seen some people that just can't take it at all. I've become that much of a trigger for them, but that's not my problem. See, that's the beauty. It's not my problem. It's their problem. My job is to not be disrespectful and not infringe on anybody else. That's the way I view it, right? So if I'm doing those things, then I've got to come to acknowledgement that I'm doing them at all, and I've got to atone for that. But how things you want to place on me because you're uncomfortable in the circumstance, nope, not like, that's not mine. And so it really frees you, like Alicia said, this is the pathway to joy. This is joy, like, because there's this freeness that you walk around with. Well, sorry you feel that way. Open to another conversation in another space and time when you're willing to acknowledge this. But I'm going to stand firm that that's not mine. I'm going to be quiet. I want to hear what other people have to say.
Hey, good morning, guys. This is so good. This is so good. I would admit, at least for me in my personal experience, sometimes this is cyclical. So I would have had that whole process and said, everything happens for a reason. I'm going to learn, and then trigger, and I'm back to, how dare they? How did this happen? Why am I here? And why me? And then it's like I have to go through the whole process all over again. I don't know if that's insanity, but it's my human experience. And it's annoying sometimes. It really is. It's like, I thought I was done with this thing. And it's back again in this kind of way, and it showed up in a different way. It's like, I didn't even know I was going to be triggered by this. And you have to kind of almost like reimagine, okay, so it happened for this reason, in this area of your life. And oh, guess what? This could also impact another area. Like I'm constantly reimagining and reprocessing what one situation could have done to help me grow in other ways. But I have to say, sometimes it's very annoying, and it's sometimes jarring and surprising. It's like, I don't even know. Wait, am I here again? Did I come back? Okay, all right. Let me try to find the joy. Let me try to find the lesson in this particular situation again. So I don't know about anyone else, but that has happened for me a couple of times, and it's always incredibly sobering and humbling. But it's also a little just my experience.
Good morning. I completely agree with you because I didn't know, first of all, I didn't know the word, so I took a lot of notes. So I thank you so much. This is really good. I've been calling it the high road, right? Which is like, well, I'm not reacting to that. It's not my problem. But like you, this week was hard. I don't know what planets and shifts were happening, but you know, I get angry, and I don't get angry in this like, why is me? Because I'm okay that it's me. It's how am I going to get you back? What am I going to do to, solve for the problem, but with anger at its core for a hot minute until I pull myself out and I'm like, all right, still need to solve for the problem, but your feelings can be pulled out. And this is hard. I mean, I will say this week, I don't call it a failure because I came out of it, but it feels like a failure in the moment, especially when your emotions are high, whether they're really sad or really, for me, it's always anger, to see the light, I just see red. So this was good. This having the steps, because I don't think anyone's ever talked to me about the steps to get yourself out of it and realizing what's yours and what's not yours. Most of the time it's not mine. It's just I'm triggered by something. But I really appreciated that, and I commiserate. It happens often, so maybe I'm also going insane over here.
So I'll say it's an interesting thing, this equanimity, because in as much at a high level, it's this idea of like taking the high road, or tapping into your higher self. The other aspect of it is okay, well, I was really angry in that situation, or I went the hell off. The equanimity is also in being okay with the fact that you did go off, right? Like not placing a value on yourself for that reaction. So it's like, no matter how you choose to look at it, you're coming from a more balanced approach, but it's that too. It's not having this feeling of, well, I usually try to show up and be the bigger person, but like, this person took me out of myself. And so I reacted in this way. It's also being okay with that and saying, you know what, was I okay? Was that an okay instance for me to have that reaction? Well, okay then. But it's getting it either way, you're getting yourself out of this cycle of rumination about every little detail of your life. Like when in an actuality, it's inconsequential in hindsight, right? You can look back at your life in hindsight and you can see how so many of those moments in which you chose one reaction versus another was inconsequential.
This is Shelley. I think as I'm thinking about it, I've always been the positive thinker, that person. I'm forever living on the high road. But I'm West Indian. I'm very hot-blooded, so I always go to 10 in my head first, and then I work myself back. So I've had a process. I think one of the things that's helped me, though, in the workplace, which is different from how I manage it with personal relationships. In the workplace, I understand that there's a different level or different set of expectations for how I respond and react to certain things. And so in those instances, I have to do the breathe and count back before I respond, whether it's in writing or in speech, because I know whatever I say will and can be used against me, right? So I'm very careful about how I respond. And sometimes no response is the best response that I can give, just to give myself some time to work through it. I also try to practice a little bit more empathy, because I do understand that my perspective and the way I've seen that situation, I don't know what's brought the other individual to do something crazy as hell, right? I don't know what their day has been or what their week has been or what's happening, right? We're all human beings, so we're all reacting and responding. But what I try to do is to practice just a little bit of empathy to say, okay, this may or may not be normal behavior, or this might be driven by something that's outside of my control. To your point, Janine, I'm not owning it. I don't have time for baggage. I got enough of my own. So I'm gonna let you keep it, but I don't verbalize it. I just have to work it through in my head to say, not something I'm not carrying this load. And I forgive myself for even, putting it on me when I know it had nothing to do with me. I'm not carrying that. In the personal life though, it is different because personal relationships are different, right? So we're charged differently. There's something more connected to the heart. But even with that, I feel like I have to use that method. And I love the way that you framed it out. So even the way that you think through those things, because I don't want to pick up if my husband's having a bad day, that automatically I'm having a bad day. I'm not, but I'm a support for him, but I'm not having a bad day. Or just how to respond to, to the example that you gave. Like if you stub your toe, you might have just had your life saved, right? You just don't know. So it's looking at certain circumstances and realizing that, at the end of the day, by tomorrow, I'm probably going to forget about it, honestly. Or does it really warrant that level of energy? So spring for me is what I call my time of renewal, but it's also a time where I look at relationships that I do have to let go of. And, a lot of times I'm not saying to people, I'm out, but there is a changeover process that I mentally go through to get myself through the rest of the year. So this was fantastic. Now I know what the word means. I'm going to be using it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Crystal, I know you wanted to get in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been putting my comments in the chat, but thank you for saying that it is okay to actually have that experience and to let it go, because it has been a week. I don't know what's going on, what was in the air or the moon, but professionally and personally, all the men and that I've dealt with actually have been triggering this week. And just kind of working through, I'm gonna take 10 steps back before I lose my mind up in here. Rest in peace, DMX. So I will learn to be okay with it and move forward and try to do better tomorrow.
It's good to hear that corporate America was popping off everywhere this week, because
They were live this week, okay?
And
They were losing it.
non-corporate, because I was like, what did you do? How
And
exactly?
small business.
Oh, all right. Well, people in business, all right, because those emails this week, I was like, delete, move to a folder. You will get responded in 14 days.
I literally had to go, exactly how bad do I need this job?
Oh, I've been there.
And then I decided I was on strike until about 1:00 because, yeah. Mm-hmm. So
No, even my sister called, and she's been at her job for 22 years, and she was like ready for you to do my resume. So I knew it was bad everywhere when she was like, I'm done.
It's in the water. Everybody's stressed the hell out and don't know what to do with it. We're sick of COVID. We're sick of jobs.
Yeah.
We're sick of kids. We're sick of everything. So you can't absorb other folks crazy. You can't carry that bag. That's not ours.
oh, it
No,
wasn't. He was like, can you just answer the question? As I stated before, it was what my email said, as I stated before.
Please see attached per last few emails.
Exactly.
Oh, I had to use that a few times. You want the receipts? They're attached. I got them.
It's the diplomacy that I have been pulling from my pinky toe all week.
Mm-hmm.
No, really, my pinky toe, and it's the tiniest little thing too. Like because like Shelly and I have discussed this before. When they made Janine Nicole, like patience was like Salt Bay. It was like not even two. Like just I ain't got the patience. I don't know where I get it from. I have immense gratitude for whomever keeps pouring into me. But I have no patience, especially for ignorance. I just I can't. Like,
Exactly.
I can't. So yes, thank you for affirming and confirming so much of the crazy I felt this week. Yes.
And Janine, please know that your nephew has been on 10 the past 2 weeks. So I'm gonna need you to call him and have a talk with him before he not make it to his birthday on Thursday. Okay? Okay, because he was on the list.
No, not boo boo. All right, I
Mhm.
got you.
That's him too. I was like, who are you talking to? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So
But
it's only
my kids were off the chain this week too. I think also they're tired. They see the
Yeah.
sun. They're so close to freedom. They feel in their minds. They don't know what's going on. It's not on the news as much anymore. Teachers are fed up. You could sense their attitude on the Zoom. Like they need to
Mhm.
go all the way to home. Some of these teachers.
The fatigue is setting in. I mean, we have to remember that, like,
Yeah.
we're now hitting that over that year mark of when this whole thing started. And so I know, like, for me, I wasn't tripping in the beginning. I was like, freedom. But like, now I could definitely tell you for certainty, I can feel the fatigue. Like there's a certain, it's like just beneath the surface. I'm getting stuff done because I must, but like there's a part of me definitely that wants to lay down and just nap because it's all just been so much, and they'll figure that out maybe by 2024. Just how much this working and going and doing during this time has affected all of us mentally, emotionally, all of that. Like,
I
yeah.
said it in 4 meetings this week. Guys, we're still in a global pandemic. I know it feels like, we're not. Because people are
Mhm.
acting like work is back to normal. And I'm still teaching on the side.
Yep.
God bless you.
uh,
I mean, I know particularly for me, it's been a little interesting because my office has always been flexible. Well, my boss has always been flexible, but now she's out on personal leave. She was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer, so it's only two of us in the office. Um and with having the kids, sometimes I'm going back to sleep, or now I'm jumping in to fill her and then I'm going back to sleep. And I find myself kind of trying to, okay, let me catch up on some work. And then I hit send and I'm like, but it's 11 o'clock. Oops. So, for some of us, we're literally working around the clock, not necessarily because you don't have to, but it's you're just doing so many different things during the day and you're trying to catch stuff, and then it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go to sleep. And now you're back up trying to get the kids, ready for school and stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to be more conscious of trying to tap out a little bit, a lot earlier.
it'd be nice if I unmuted myself. Anyway, I will end the general meeting here. Thank you all. I loved all the feedback. I love that this is something we're all kind of thinking about in different ways, but you didn't know what to call it. So that's awesome. I think this was a good talk. I will get everything uploaded in the next few days. I'll get you out the new invite for May. And I think in May, we'll discuss a little bit about the survey results. I'll have more on that back so we can kind of run through the executive strategy report that's soon to be completed. And I don't even know yet, but there'll be some fun topic. I'll keep you posted. But you all have a great day. And thanks for being here.
Bye,
Thank you.
ladies.
Bye. Thank you. This was great.